Sora found himself on a desolate, rocky terrain once more. A sense of melancholy washed over him. It was the floating smoke sky island, filled with ruined Western-style buildings. The entire place felt as if no life had ever existed there at all. Suddenly, a distant, powerful presence made him wonder if it could possibly be a human out here. The presence drew nearer with heavy, thudding steps, resonating through the barren ground. A massively built, shirtless figure with flowing blonde hair and sunglasses emerged, beckoning him forward. This imposing figure declared he would wait for Sora at the very edge of the abyss. With a gasp, Sora jolted awake, his heart pounding as he lay in bed, trying to catch his breath. It was that weird dream again, he thought, the unsettling images still fresh in his mind. Just then, his mother's voice cut through the morning quiet, reminding Sora that they would be late. He mumbled that he was coming. Later, while in the bathroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that he knew the man from his dream. Looking into the steamy mirror, a wave of confusion washed over him. He hummed while brushing his teeth, vaguely wondering if he had been studying too much lately. As he spat into the sink, his father, fresh from a shower and towel drying his hair, appeared in the mirror's reflection. His dad cheerfully asked if Sora had overslept, then playfully ruffled his hair. Sora, now 15, complained about still being treated like a kid, but his dad merely flexed, boasting about his strong, muscular body. Sora, thoroughly disgusted, yelled that he wasn't looking and quickly grabbed a bottle from the shelf. He grumbled that if they didn't live in such a tiny apartment, he wouldn't be subjected to seeing his father naked every day. His dad just chuckled, promising a big house once he got rich, adding that Sora and Riku could finally have their own rooms. Sora, rinsing his mouth, drily remarked that his dad had been making that same promise for 5 long years. His father laughed it off, saying life had become a lot easier since Riku joined the self-defense force. Sora simply acknowledged this with a quiet, "Is that so?" He mused that it had already been 3 years since his brother joined the SDF, and he himself planned on joining in the future. He knew that then it would be time to say goodbye to this lively, albeit cramped life, to his dad who joked around a lot and was a little unreliable, and to his mom, who often came off as strict but loved them all very much. It was comforting that they were here, he thought, wishing this life could go on forever. Suddenly, the apartment shook violently. His parents cried out, wondering if it was an earthquake or what was happening. But Sora had always known this peaceful life would come to an end one day. What he hadn't expected, as a colossal tower erupted from the ground outside their window, was for it to end quite like this. The tower had come upon them. Sora stared out the window in disbelief, muttering that this had to be some kind of joke. At the time, seeing fighter jets already circling the monstrous structure, he didn't yet know just how much the appearance of that tower would drastically change the history of mankind. But what he did know, with a chilling certainty, was that this tower was somehow connected to his dreams. His brother, Riku, had called, trying to reassure them that everything would be all right. He just needed to follow the SDF's instructions, and he would be able to return home soon. His promise, however, came in a weak, strained voice over the phone. That night was the last time Sora heard from his brother, as his parents looked on with deep worry etched on their faces. The news initially reported there would be no problems as long as people stayed home, even as images of disaster striking flashed across the screen. But then, reports flooded into the number of towers appearing around the world had reached 20. Soon after, the news broadcast stopped altogether. Only the radio remained, playing the same sparse information over and over again. Then came the official order: evacuate to a shelter immediately. His mom left a letter for Riku as she and Sora, along with his father who was packing essentials, headed to the designated evacuation shelter. Everything they saw along the way to the shelter seemed to be hinting at something terrible. Soldiers were passing by in their military vehicles, and all of them wore grim expressions of utter despair. Their vehicles were covered in horrible, deep claw marks, and as his family walked past, the disgusting stench of decay wafted from inside them. His father, looking around at the unsettling sights, wondered aloud what on earth was happening to their world. They finally arrived at the gymnasium temporary evacuation shelter. The large space was packed wall to wall with refugees, yet hardly anyone spoke a word. It was an eerie silence, as if everyone present was simply waiting for their death. His mother called for Sora to come over to where she'd found a spot, and he quickly complied. But even in this oppressive silence, there were troublemakers, and they were doing everything they could to let their unpleasant presence be known. A man was aggressively confronting a young boy, loudly accusing the child of stealing his bread. The boy cried out in fear. The terrified boy stammered that he didn't steal it. The man, however, insisted that everyone was only given one piece, and that the boy had probably eaten his own already. He then cruelly struck the child. Onlookers whispered amongst themselves about the shocking assault, wondering if somebody, anybody, would do something, but no one dared to intervene. The man smirked, holding the bread he'd taken. He then leaned down, menacingly asking the boy if it was okay for him to have this bread since he wasn't full yet. The boy could only whimper a yes. The man declared triumphantly that until this whole situation came to an end, the boy's bread was his. He callously added that it would only be for a few days anyway, and it wasn't like the boy was going to die from it. The child just sobbed quietly. At that moment, Sora's father stepped in, firmly asking the man why he was doing this when he knew their current dire situation. The bully sneered, dismissively telling the old-timer to worry about himself instead. Sora's father, his voice sharp with controlled anger, demanded that he give that child his bread back immediately. The bully, enraged at being challenged, yelled at him to shut up and threw a wild punch. Sora's father, however, swiftly dodged the blow and landed a powerful kick squarely to the bully's stomach. The bully collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Sora's father calmly retrieved the bread and returned it to the grateful child, who timidly thanked him, while the bully cursed him from where he lay on the floor. Sora's father then gave the downed bully a stern, unwavering look. The bully merely clicked his tongue in frustration and pain. Spitting on the floor, he got up and vowed that he would remember this as he walked away. Sora looked at his dad with a mixture of concern and admiration. His father, noticing his son's expression, reassured him not to worry, promising he'd keep an eye on that guy. Sora thought to himself that, even in death, he wouldn't forget that man, Eiji Kagawa. Dark memories flashed through Sora's mind. Kagawa was scum who had always taken immense pleasure in bullying him relentlessly in the past. Suddenly, a soldier burst into the shelter, kicking open a door and shouting an emergency message at the top of his lungs. He yelled that everyone must exit the evacuation shelter through the back and get into one of the waiting trucks immediately. A man in a pristine suit, coolly adjusting his glasses, demanded to know why. The flustered soldier stammered that the information was confidential, and he simply could not say. The man repeated incredulously, "You can't say?" He then launched into an angry tirade, questioning why, after people had been confined to their homes for 2 days straight and then forced to evacuate to a place like this, they still couldn't be told anything of substance. He angrily slammed his hand down on a nearby surface, demanding to know what they were even paying taxes for. The crowd behind him grew visibly agitated, murmuring their agreement. The soldier, looking terrified toward the entrance they had just come through, suddenly yelled that they were here and everyone needed to run quickly. Someone in the crowd nervously asked who they were. Sora urgently tried to pull his parents along, urging his mom and dad to hurry, while his father looked back in confusion. Sora felt a deep, sinking feeling. He had a very bad feeling about this, the kind you get when you realize you forgot to clear your browser history on the family computer. The soldier, now struggling to hold a bar door against some unseen force, screamed that he couldn't stop them any longer and for everyone to hurry up and get into the vehicles. Then, with a horrifying crash, the door burst open and monstrous figures swarmed in, attacking the panicking crowd. A grotesque, fanged creature with glowing red eyes let out a terrifying roar. Sora stared in wide-eyed horror, his mind reeling as he tried to comprehend what in the world was happening. The air filled with terrified cries for help as monstrous figures overwhelmed the evacuees. Sora found himself in the midst of the stampede, a primal fear gripping him as people screamed about the monsters. He heard his parents desperately calling his name, urging him to hurry as they fled towards the evacuation trucks. The shelter descended into utter chaos, with piercing screams echoing as people were cut down by the invading creatures. His father, with a look of grim determination, told Sora and his mother that the first truck couldn't accommodate any more people and that they should get on first, his voice strained with urgency. Sora reached out desperately as his parents were pushed towards the already crowded vehicle. For a fleeting moment, Sora managed to grasp his father's hand, his father shouting his name amidst the pandemonium. However, people already on the truck began to shout angrily, protesting that the truck was already full and telling Sora's father to get off if he was just going to slow them down. Sora gritted his teeth in frustration, a helpless curse escaping his lips. Making a split-second decision, he let go, shouting to his father that he would get on a different truck, even as his father called out his name again in distress. He raced toward the next truck, only to find it, too, was completely full. Undeterred, he sprinted to another, but the situation was the same. This one was also packed beyond capacity. His eyes scanned desperately until he spotted the last remaining truck. As he scrambled towards it, trying to pull himself aboard, he saw Kagawa and another man already there. Suddenly, a hand reached down to help him up. Relief washed over Sora as he grabbed the offered hand, gasping out a thank you. But then he saw the face of his helper, Kagawa, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, who mockingly asked if Sora was saying thanks. Sora's eyes widened in horrified recognition. Kagawa, his eyes glinting with malice, declared that thanks was his line to say, and Sora despaired, wondering why, of all people, it had to be him. With a vicious shove, Kagawa pushed Sora off the moving truck, sneering that Sora could die in his dad's place, calling him a piece of trash. Sora tumbled backwards, the ground rushing up to meet him, the thought flashing through his mind that it was all over. He hit the pavement hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Lying there, bruised and dazed, he desperately thought that he didn't want to die yet. He weakly called out for someone, anyone, his voice a choked plea for help. As his vision blurred, a pair of ethereal, glowing feet appeared before him, and he faintly recognized the spectral form of the man from his dreams, even as Kagawa's triumphant face lingered in his thoughts. It was indeed the imposing figure from his recurring dream. The spectral man simply stated that he would be waiting for Sora at the edge of the abyss, and a swirling dark vortex materialized in the dreamlike space. Sora blinked, finding himself lying on hard, unfamiliar rocky ground. He dazedly wondered if what he had just experienced was merely a dream. Looking around the desolate landscape, he frantically questioned where the hell he was, just as a crude stone axe thudded ominously nearby. Startled, he looked up to see a grotesque, green-skinned creature, a monster, swinging another axe towards him. Scrambling backward, he cried out, realizing it was a real monster, and a wave of panic hit him as he wondered where his parents were and why he was the only one here. The desolate, ruined surroundings made him question if this was hell or if he had already died, just as another axe flew past him. The weapon grazed his cheek, drawing blood, and he yelped in pain. He cursed the damn monster that had struck him. The creature advanced menacingly, and Sora, terrified, couldn't understand why it wouldn't stop coming after him. The monster, with its long tongue lolling, lunged forward. Bolting to his feet, Sora ran, screaming in confusion about what the hell was going on. Flashes of recent events assaulted his mind, the gigantic tower that had appeared out of nowhere. The leering face of Kagawa as he betrayed him, the mysterious old dude from his visions, and now this relentless monster intent on killing him. A surge of furious adrenaline, like he'd just chugged 3 energy drinks, coursed through him, his eyes glowing with a faint purple light. Screaming for all the bastards to die, he grabbed a nearby rock and smashed it into the attacking monster with all his might. The creature fell, lifeless. Sora stood panting, the raw realization dawning on him. He had survived. Looking at the monster's corpse up close, he thought it looked like something straight out of a video game, then noticed strange black text on its chest, wondering if it signified a rank. He stumbled back in surprise as a shimmering, dark crystal began to emerge from the dead monster's chest. Sora, a fresh cut still stinging on his cheek, stared at the levitating object, which pulsed with an unnatural light. With a bewildered expression, he watched as the crystal floated towards him. Before he could react, it shot forward, phasing directly into his body. He gasped, shocked that it had gone inside him. Touching his cheek, he was astonished to find his wounds completely healed. That wasn't all. Clenching his fists, he realized he felt significantly stronger too. He picked up the fallen monster's crude axe, a new thought forming. Did this mean he could level up if he beat enemies, just like in a game? He reasoned there might be more of these things on this tiny, floating island and decided he'd better scout around so he didn't get jumped again. He surveyed the ancient, crumbling ruins that dotted the landscape. After completing a full lap of the immediate area, he found no more monsters and, crucially, no other discernible path forward or off the floating platform. He gazed at a distant, larger ruin, wondering if reaching it was his only option if he wanted to get out of this bizarre place. The entire island, a chunk of rock and ruins, floated ominously in a sea of clouds. He then noticed a series of stone slabs protruding from the island's edge, forming a precarious staircase leading downwards, and carefully began to use his newly acquired axe to help him navigate the descent. These were floating stairs, winding down around the Smoke Sky Island. A sense of unease settled over him. This looked undeniably bad. He proceeded cautiously down the treacherous, floating steps. He mused that in video games, terrain like this was prime monster territory, though at least in a game, he'd just respawn if he fell off. However, he was definitely not going to test whether or not this world operated under game logic by taking a leap of faith. Finally, he reached the end of the precarious steps, exclaiming that he had made it. The stairs terminated at an arched entrance leading into a darker structure. He stood for a moment in a dimly lit stone corridor, axe held ready. Suddenly, a nearby brazier flared to life, casting flickering light. Peering further, he saw a large, imposing tombstone-like monument at the end of a chamber, now illuminated by the newly lit torch. He reached out, touching the cold stone covered in strange, unfamiliar characters. Yet, their meaning seemed to flow directly into his brain. The inscription revealed that the fragments belong to their bearers, and by acquiring all of them, one shall earn the right to leave the abyss. So, this was the abyss he had heard about in his dream. A grim smirk touched his lips as the reality sank in. He had to collect all the fragments, like some kind of deadly, interdimensional fetch quest gone wild, just to get out of here. Great, another collectathon, he thought, but this one's got a you might die difficulty setting. All right then, he murmured to himself, standing resolute on the steps. A newfound motivation surged through him. Thinking back, that first monster wasn't even that strong. He was determined to survive and escape this nightmare. With a grunt, he pushed open the massive stone doors before him, ready to face whatever lay beyond. The rules of this brutal place began to unfold. The first layer of the abyss was a 900 square meter area, and the monster he'd slain there bore the number 1 carved into its body. The second layer doubled to 1,800 square meters, housing a monster marked with a 2. The third layer expanded further to 3,600 square meters, where one of the 4 wolf-like creatures he faced was branded with the number 3. It became chillingly clear that the vital fragments were only found within these specifically numbered monsters. These fragments were the keys to advancing, 3 leading to 4, but the higher the number, the terrifyingly stronger the monsters became. Each key propelled him through another imposing doorway into deeper peril. What grew increasingly concerning, his face hardening with each battle, was how these keys became progressively more difficult and dangerous to obtain. The area he had to clear doubled with every layer, morphing into vast, treacherous terrains like sprawling, icy mountains. Concurrently, the number of monsters also doubled, often forcing him to carve his way through veritable armies of beasts. But Sora, too, grew. With guttural roars and surges of raw power, he became stronger, more brutal, sometimes ending fights by slamming his fist, causing violent shockwaves. As he climbed the endless layers, the variety of monsters constantly increased, forcing him to adapt as he surveyed new, hostile vistas. On the 12th floor, he finally encountered the same types of monsters that had overrun the shelter. By then, however, they were no longer a match for him. He stood grimly victorious over their remains. Yet, the sheer volume became a suffocating tide. So many monsters swarmed him now that his senses had begun to numb from the ceaseless slaughter. Notifications of cleared layers blurred. The 13th with 4,096 monsters, the 14th with 16,384, and by the 21st, over 1,000,000. Reaching the 30th floor meant facing 500 million creatures, some of them colossal, multi-eyed horrors. Finding the key bearers in these sprawling, teeming layers was like searching for a needle in a cosmic haystack, especially when some were giant winged beasts flanked by swarms. Some key monsters were heavily guarded by phalanxes of powerful protectors, while others hid cunningly in small caves, demanding relentless pursuit. The most infuriating part, he realized while shattering a rock golem, was the sheer time it took to kill each one, battling towering brutes and delivering countless death blows, each fallen key bearer, like one Mark 12, a grim milestone. Yet, through it all, he kept moving forward. His appearance was now feral. Hair long and wild, clothes in tatters, he pushed open another set of gargantuan doors. Abyss, 42nd layer. Number of monsters, 2,199,023,255,552. An astronomical, suffocating horde stretched before him. As a dragon-like beast swooped, a dry, almost manic chuckle escaped him. His hair had turned stark white, eyes blazing purple, a crazed, powerful grin etched on his face as he roared. This is the shit. Dragons wheeled over ancient, crumbling ruins, the constant, bleak backdrop to his existence. He paused, white hair swaying, and idly wondered what year it could possibly be. But the thought was fleeting. Time was meaningless here. There was only the unending rhythm of death and massacre, each passing moment marked by another scratch on stone. He knelt, adding another tally beside a pile of bones, a silent testament to his endless war, his eyes distant and weary. It was a ceaseless cycle, the death of monsters, their shadows falling one after another as larger, more terrifying ones took their place, and his own relentless, brutal massacring, the ground perpetually slick with blood, his power unleashing devastating shockwaves, each motion a whirlwind of deadly force, often culminating in him holding the severed head of yet another beast. He glanced at his latest kill, expressionless, and muttered about how many this made now. Oh well, he sighed, deciding to cut it up first before the next wave. He stared at the wall of countless tally marks, a profound weariness in his voice. Isn't it about time? Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the ground. He looked up, a desperate hope flickering. I found a key, he cried, arms raised. The earth around him shattered, exploding upwards in a maelstrom of rock. From the chaos, an enormous, terrifying insectoid creature with multiple bladed limbs erupted, dwarfing everything. What an entrance, Sora remarked, a ghost of his old sarcasm surfacing. He eyed the colossal beast, his glowing eyes narrowed, and demanded if it was the key. The creature responded with a massive, razor-sharp appendage crashing down. Sora braced himself. No matter how strong the opponent, it was all the same now. He prepared to unleash his devastating power. Even monsters who believed themselves overwhelmingly powerful would die in a single hit from him. But as the dust settled, a look of dawning horror, then utter, soul-crushing despair, overcame him. No, he whispered. He stood amidst the ruin, realizing with chilling certainty that all power had lost its meaning. The endless slaughter, the constant growth, it was all pointless without an end. His scarred fist clenched, trembling. "Where?" he began, his voice hoarse. "Is the 42nd layer's key?" He threw his head back and roared at the blood-red sky, demanding it to come out already. The ground cracked under the force of his despair. "I've had enough," he screamed, as countless winged shadows, more dragons, filled the sky, promising only more of the same. In the year 20XX, the world changed irrevocably when 20 colossal towers suddenly materialized across the globe, piercing the skies above bewildered cities. Before humanity could even begin to comprehend their ominous presence, hordes of grotesque monsters poured forth from these structures, unleashing a wave of destruction that nearly wiped out humankind. Most people were mercilessly slaughtered. That dreadful period became known as Judgment Day, a time of unparalleled chaos and carnage. Amidst the devastation, a handful of survivors awakened, gaining access to a mysterious system that notified them of their awakening and initialized their combat stats. Those who awakened were granted overwhelming power, new abilities flaring around them as status windows appeared. Slowly, human society began to rebuild, and these awakened individuals, now known as hunters, founded guilds, often basing themselves in fortified structures near the towers, ready to face the ongoing threat. Meanwhile, far from this new reality, Sora, in his monstrous, battle-hardened form, was still locked in the endless struggle of the abyss, relentlessly pursuing a demonic, wolf-like creature across a landscape of bones. He roared at it, demanding to see its stats, but then paused in confusion. "Huh? What the?" He trailed off, as if hearing something unexpected. The small, dog-like creature it was chasing suddenly used an advanced transfer scroll, and faint voices, seemingly from another dimension, urged someone to stop it, not to let that summon go through. Sora, panting, wondered if he had just heard human speech. His eyes, glowing with purple light, fixed on the creature as a brilliant portal began to shimmer into existence behind it. A flicker of hope, something he hadn't felt in an eternity, ignited within him. Could that be an exit? His scarred, powerful form tensed. There was actually an exit out of this hell. With a desperate surge, he launched himself towards the swirling light. As he neared the portal, warning messages began to flash around him, declaring that abyssal summoning was unable to transfer more than 2 living beings. The warnings multiplied, forming ethereal chains that seemed to bar his path. But Sora's resolve was absolute, his teeth gritted in a feral snarl. He vowed that he wouldn't let anyone or anything get in his way. With a final, earth-shattering roar, he smashed through the warnings and plunged into the beckoning light. Meanwhile, just outside S-City on Earth, in a dark, foreboding forest under a gloomy sky, a young woman with pink hair, clad in stylish but impractical armor, gasped for breath. Her high-heel boot caught on the uneven ground. Yusunazuki, level 19, knew she had to shake off her pursuers quickly as she stumbled through the dense undergrowth. Suddenly, a thorny vine snaked out, ensnaring her ankle. She cried out as she was violently tripped, crashing to the forest floor. "This is bad," she panted, struggling against the grasping vines that now held her fast. The tendrils tightened, and she muttered about what a pain this was. 2 figures emerged from the shadows. Aika, a level 34 druid, and a burly man. Aika coolly told you to hand over the advanced transfer scroll, stating that a level 60 scroll wasn't something a level 19 rookie like her could handle, especially one who thought running in heels through a monster-infested forest was a good idea. The man, Choji Shido, a level 35 swordsman, advised Aika not to kill you, but then menacingly told you to hand it over, or he wouldn't show any mercy. You, outraged, protested that hunter-on-hunter combat was forbidden and that they were breaking the rules. The third pursuer, Shozei Tashida, a hulking level 38 barbarian, merely scoffed at the mention of rules. He slammed his enormous great sword into the ground beside Yu's head, growling that he made the rules here. Shozei then offered to let her keep all her limbs intact if she gave them a scroll. Cornered, Yu clutched the scroll tightly, warning them that they wouldn't want to corner her any further if they knew what was good for them. Aika's eyes widened in alarm. She realized Yu was about to use a force summon and yelled for the others to stop her. Shozei cursed, calling you a bitch. He lunged, striking her and demanding the scroll. But it was too late. Yu had activated it, the tip of the scroll glowing with arcane energy. Shozei stared in disbelief, recognizing a teleportation circle forming. Yu, her eyes blazing, declared that if she was going to die anyway, she'd drag them all down with her. Shozei yelled that it was a force summon, and Aika cried out in terror that no one could control an advanced monster dragon like that, and they were all done for. Aika frantically screamed for them to stop her now, but Yu, with a final, defiant cry of die, was engulfed by the erupting energy. A massive vortex of swirling blue lightning tore through the forest clearing. Shozei and Aika watched in grim apprehension, feeling the overwhelming, terrifying energy emanating from the summon. This was not looking good for them. Chains of pure lightning shot up from the ground, coalescing. The group of hunters watched as the energy solidified, one exclaiming that it had finally appeared. From the dissipating light, a small, three-headed dog, identified by the system as Cerberus LV3, emerged looking rather unimpressive and surrounded by confused question marks from the onlookers. One of the hunters burst into laughter, mocking that all that for a level 3 Cerberus, and sarcastically offered the tiny creature a bone. She, equally unimpressed, wondered aloud what kind of monster she had summoned, calling the scroll she risked her life to protect a complete joke. Yu herself stared in stunned disbelief at the anticlimactic result. Suddenly, a monstrous, razor-clawed hand, far larger than any part of the Cerberus, shot out and impaled the Cerberus. From the fading portal, a colossal, white-haired, battle-scarred figure emerged, towering over the now minuscule Cerberus and the terrified Yu. The remaining hunters screamed in horror, one stammering about a humanoid monster. Yu stared up at the terrifying being, a flicker of shocked recognition in her eyes. "Ayu," she whispered. Sora, his body a testament to countless battles, took a deep, shuddering breath. He had made it out. He threw his head back, a wild, unrestrained laugh tearing from his throat, the sound echoing through the terrified forest. He had finally escaped that hellish place. Sora's wild laughter echoed through the portal-torn clearing, sending shivers down the spines of the remaining hunters. Shozei, Tashida, and Aika recoiled, the sheer pressure emanating from Sora making their bodies freeze. Just hearing his laughter was terrifying. Aika, her face pale, demanded to know who this monstrous being was. Sora, oblivious or uncaring, simply looked at Aika with a quizzical tilt of his head, a silent question in his glowing eyes. Aika instinctively reached back, a gasp escaping her as an almost palpable aura of power rolled off him. His eyes, burning like red coals in the shadows of his wild white hair, scanned the surroundings. He grabbed Aika, his voice a guttural rasp, and demanded if this was Earth. Aika, terrified, stammered that of course it was. A wide, triumphant grin stretched across Sora's scarred face. Finally, he had returned. The two remaining male hunters, Choji and Shozei, watched this exchange with wary aggression. Shozei scoffed, asking if Sora was cosplaying or something, because if so, his caveman chic was a bit much, even for a con. Choji, however, charged forward, yelling at Sora not to underestimate the Tiger's Roar Guild and calling him a hobo. Their attacks were swift and coordinated, a flurry of blows aimed at Sora. Sora's glowing purple eye narrowed slightly. Shozei, feeling an overwhelming power, stuttered that Sora was a monster. The word echoed in his mind, a primal fear seizing him as Sora's power flared, his eyes now burning red. With a choked gasp, Shozei felt an invisible force constrict his throat. Sora lifted him effortlessly, demanding that Shozei show him his number. Shozei, struggling for air, gasped out, "Number? What are you talking about?" Sora's expression tightened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. His claw-like hand shot out, and with a sickening thud, Shozei was slammed to the ground, a dark stain blooming on his trousers as he lost control of his bladder. He lay there, whimpering, "Damn it, I..." His remaining companion cried out, "Boss!" Sora looked down at the terrified hunters, his voice low and dangerous as he told them to get lost. They scrambled away, Choji vowing that he'd remember this as they fled. Yu Sanozaki stared at Sora's retreating back, awestruck by his incredible power and the terrible scars that crisscrossed his body. She wondered who he could possibly be. Surely, he couldn't be a monster summoned from the abyss by her scroll, right? Sora turned, asking her how many years it had been since the towers appeared. "You," startled, replied, "Huh?" She then answered softly that it had been 5 years. Sora, his glowing eye fixed on her, pressed further. Was this really Earth? What was this about a scroll, and why was she dressed like that? You explained that ever since the towers showed up, a system had appeared to humans, a system that informed them that in the 5 years since the towers' appearance, a third of the city had fallen. Sora listened, his mind reeling. Had the world truly changed that much in the 5 years he'd spent trapped in the abyss? You continued, showing him an info panel depicting a monstrous beast, explaining that S City had been hit by the 7th large invasion, and she had fled from there. S City, Sora exclaimed, his eye widening in shock. That's where I was born. He grabbed you urgently, demanding to know the current state of S City. You, flinching, told him it was already completely destroyed, but added that strong people had been sent there, so they should be able to slay the monsters. How do I get to S City from here? Sora demanded, his gaze intense. You began to point, saying, "You go over the dash," but Sora was already a blur, streaking away in the direction she indicated. You stared after him, nonplussed, muttering, "Oh, he's going alone." A mysterious man had indeed appeared, she thought, turning towards the grim, cross-marked ruins in the distance. She had to tell her sister about this. Meanwhile, the defeated hunters limped through the devastated outskirts of the city. Shozei, supported by Choji and Aika, cursed that bastard. Suddenly, dark, thorny tendrils erupted from the ground, ensnaring them as a hooded figure demanded to know who they were. The figure, wreathed in shadow with glowing eyes, declared that it could sense his presence on all of them. Towering over the now terrified Yu, who had evidently been caught again, the figure gave them 3 seconds to reveal Sora's whereabouts. The hunters looked at each other in fear and confusion. Shozei, utterly bewildered by this new threat, yelled, "Are you fucking kidding me? What now?" The hooded figure, its patience clearly exhausted, simply stated, "Time's up." With a swift, brutal attack, it was over. System notifications appeared. Aika, level 34 druid, deceased. Back at the tower front, Tiger's Roar Guild headquarters, a modern skyscraper stood amidst the city. A subordinate reported to Richt Mukai, a level 1 18 storm priest, that there were no signs of life from Master Tashida's party of 4, and the whereabouts of Sanozaki and the scroll were unknown. Richt, swirling a glass of red wine, contemptuously declared them trash. He questioned how the men his subordinate recommended couldn't even beat one level 19 summoner. The subordinate nervously explained that their signals all went out at the same time. Richt, his expression grim, concluded they were all killed in one hit. He ordered the subordinate to find out who did it, and to capture Sanozaki and make her explain herself. Standing by the window, Richt declared he would kill anyone who laid a hand on his men. Just then, Sora, in his human form but still exuding an aura of immense power, flashed past the window in a streak of light, startling Richt. Richt, catching the incredible smell of blood, wondered who that could have been. He looked out at the devastated cityscape, noticing a fallen zone in the distance. This invasion, he realized, was on a whole other scale. Big forces were undoubtedly at play. The tower that had been sleeping for 5 years was finally making its move, heralded by shadowy figures silhouetted against a fiery sky. Rick turned, his voice urgent, ordering all search parties to fall back. This was an emergency, he declared. Sora, now back in his original human form, soared through the sky above a ruined city teeming with flying monsters, landing atop a crumbling building in the S-City Fallen Zone. In the 5 years he was stuck in the abyss, this place, his home, had turned into hell. He, Sora, who was once weak and struggling against even a single goblin, had become strong, capable of felling massive beasts with chain flails. With his senses numbed by endless battle, he had nearly become a beast himself, at one point even shown resorting to eating the raw flesh of monsters to survive. But the thought of his family, his dad, mom, and younger self had kept him going. The monsters he once feared were now just small fries, easily dispatched with a flick of his power. His thoughts were consumed by his family. Dad, mom, brother, please be safe, he prayed, as he launched himself into the monster-infested city. S-City, once bustling with life, was now a desolate wasteland, its skyline dominated by skeletal, ruined buildings. Every structure showed signs of a massive quake. Yet, as Sora walked barefoot through the debris-strewn interior of one such building, there was no trace of monsters actively killing anyone. He knew that ever since the evacuation, nobody was supposed to live here. Reaching a familiar, battered doorway, he paused, then pushed it open, softly announcing, "I'm home." He stepped into the dilapidated remains of his family's apartment, his silhouette framed by the bright light from the doorway. He had known the place would be empty, but he came anyway, drawn by the happy memories that lingered within its crumbling walls. As he stood by a dust-covered window, his gaze fell upon a piece of paper on a nearby table. "Huh, what's that?" he wondered. He picked it up. It was a letter. It read, "Dear Sora, everybody says you're dead, but your mom and I refuse to believe it. We grabbed your things and set them up exactly like in your old room." Tears welled in Sora's eyes as he read on, a choked sob escaping him. They had risked their lives to come back here for him, believing he would return. The letter continued, "We even laid out your favorite clothes from sizes S to L. That way, whenever you return, you can slip into fresh clothes." He found a drawer containing a rolled-up map and some photos. There's a map to Shelter 6 in the drawer. Once you read this, promise you'll come find us. He picked up a faded family photograph, his parents, and a younger version of himself, and Riku smiling back at him. The letter concluded, "We'll be waiting always. Love, Mom and Dad." Clutching the letter and photo, Sora, now wearing one of the jackets his parents had left, wept openly, the years of pain and loneliness pouring out. Composing himself, he picked up a combat knife he found, his expression hardening. How strong was he now, he wondered. If he was tough enough to end this apocalypse, maybe, just maybe, he could regain the days he had lost. He looked at his reflection, his white hair now short, the scars on his face a stark reminder of his ordeal. Shelter 6. That was his destination. He surveyed the ruined cityscape, the map showing a direct path east. The road was a wreck, but he decided blazing his own trail would be faster, a determined smirk playing on his lips. With a powerful leap, he launched himself across the rooftops. A monstrous bird-like creature swooped down to attack, but Sora, with a contemptuous swipe of his hand, tore through it and countless others in a bloody blur, the resulting explosions dotting the cityscape like deadly fireworks. At a guard post overlooking the ruins, one guard asked another if he'd heard that loud sound. The other, taking a swig from a canteen, dismissed it, saying his friend was probably drunk and hearing things, and that guard duty was boring enough as it was. Just then, a streak of light flashed past them at incredible speed. "What was that?" one exclaimed, pointing, while the other stammered that he couldn't even see it. Another guard ran up, excitedly asking if they saw that, claiming he got it on camera. The image on his device showed a blurry figure streaking through the air, leaving trails of light. They wondered if it could possibly be a person. Elsewhere in the ruins, a young woman with pink hair cowered, screaming for someone not to come any closer. 3 thuggish-looking men surrounded her. She pleaded for forgiveness, saying she only came to look for food. One of the men, eyeing her figure, commented that it had been a while since they'd seen a woman, and that she had quite the figure for a survivor in the wasteland. Another, licking his lips with a lecherous grin, assured her not to worry, claiming they were good guys. He advanced, promising to take good care of her, as she begged him to stop. He grabbed her, telling her not to be scared, and with a predatory gleam in his eye, promised he'd be gentle. He leaned in close, his breath hot on her ear, and whispered that it would be a shame not to enjoy a body like hers. Suddenly, a foot crunched down on debris nearby. Some things never change, a voice observed. Sora stood there, his eyes glowing with purple light, and spat, "You pieces of trash." The leader of the thugs whipped around, demanding to know who was there and warning that he wouldn't get off easy if he was going to butt in. He ordered his men to get him. 2 of them charged, yelling for the brat to die. They moved in a blur. One thug fell, clutching a bloody wound, then another, dispatched with brutal efficiency. Sora's gaze was cold and merciless. Another gasped as Sora caught his punch, then delivered a devastating blow to his face. Kagawa looked up at the attacker, demanding to know who the hell he was and boasting that he was part of the Tiger's Roar Guild, threatening that the guild wouldn't let this slide. Sora simply stated Kagawa's full name. He then ran a hand through his white hair, asking if Kagawa had already forgotten the face of the guy he'd killed. Kagawa's eyes widened in horrified recognition. "What? Don't tell me. Is that you, Kojima?" He stammered that it was impossible. Sora loomed over him, his power flaring. Kagawa scrambled back, screaming for Sora to stay back and questioning how he was still alive. Sora let out a short, humorless laugh. His hand shot out, gripping Kagawa's throat. "That's right," Sora confirmed, his voice like ice, as Kagawa choked. He informed Kagawa that he had crawled his way up from the pits of hell, all because of him. Veins throbbed on Kagawa's face as the pressure increased. "And now," Sora snarled, tightening his grip, "it's your turn, T.O., go there." He declared his intent to tear off every shred of dignity Kagawa had, proclaiming, "This is my power now," as Kagawa clawed helplessly at his hands. Dark, demonic voices whispered in Sora's mind, urging him to kill Kagawa, telling him he was the strongest, that he should bend everything to his will as a monstrous, shadowy visage formed behind him. As Sora confronted Kagawa, memories of past torment flooded his mind. The relentless bullying, the humiliation, and the crushing helplessness. Kagawa had always just tormented his past self. Sora declared that today, all that pain and suffering would be returned. He recalled Kagawa's cruel justification for the bullying, that crushing Sora's dignity simply felt good. Sora's eyes, one a chilling red, narrowed with resolve. He released his grip on Kagawa's throat, and Kagawa collapsed, coughing violently. A flicker of hesitation crossed Sora's face. He couldn't become the same as his tormentor. Yet, the image of Kagawa preying on the helpless woman flashed in his mind. He reasoned that if scum like Kagawa were allowed to continue breathing, more innocent people would suffer and die. Sora calmly addressed Kagawa, stating that since Kagawa had tried and failed to kill him, he wouldn't kill Kagawa in return. However, he couldn't just let him walk away. Kagawa, terrified, stammered, asking what Sora planned to do. Sora then began to list Kagawa's transgressions. For the 2 years Kagawa made his life hell at school, 1 punch. For terrorizing the weak, another punch. And for trying to kill him by pushing him off the truck, 2 punches. He told Kagawa to take 4 blows, and they would call it even. Kagawa, whimpering, apologized, saying it was all his fault, and pleaded for forgiveness, fearing he'd die from the first hit given Sora's current power. Sora, grabbing Kagawa's shirt, offered a chilling reassurance, telling him not to worry, his reflection glinting in Kagawa's terrified eye. Then, Sora promised to go easy on him before delivering the first brutal punch. As Kagawa reeled, Sora announced the second punch, his remaining goons watching in stunned silence. Blood splattered across the ground. The third punch followed swiftly. Sora loomed over the battered Kagawa, ordering him to get up as the man just whimpered. Broken and bleeding, Kagawa begged Sora to kill him already. Sora ignored the plea, winding up for the final blow, a devastating strike that shattered the ground beneath Kagawa, leaving him a screaming, broken mess. Sora observed the result. Kagawa's limbs seemingly useless, his body a vessel of pain, and deemed it about right. He then instructed Kagawa's terrified companions to take him to a hospital, warning them never to show their faces in front of him again. With that, Sora leaped away, leaving a small crater in his wake. The cleanup, he thought, was done. It was time to move on and head home towards Shelter 6. Meanwhile, at the S-City buffer zone, soldiers on wall watch duty expressed their boredom, one remarking how he'd kill for this easy duty as they didn't actually have to fight monsters there. Another soldier joked about not being a wimp if a monster did show up, drawing laughs. Their commanding officer, First Lieutenant Tanji Kajura, a level 31 commander, curtly told them to stay sharp, as there was no telling when one might appear. Private Shoki Matsura, a level 22 warrior, pointed out that this was the buffer zone and monsters from Area X hardly ever showed up. His words were immediately proven wrong as shadowy tendrils erupted, ensnaring several soldiers. A colossal, level 45 shell-type monster, a child of Kraken, emerged, its single massive eye glaring. The lieutenant yelled for his men to maintain formation and not lose their cool. They opened fire, but their bullets sparked harmlessly against its tough hide. A soldier cursed. Its level was too high, rendering their weapons ineffective. The monster prepared to strike, and the lieutenant ordered everyone to spread out. Tentacles lashed out, striking down soldiers. One man screamed his comrade Shun's name, then, filled with rage, cursed the funking octopus and charged with explosives, vowing to take it down while his comrades provided covering fire. The monster's eye focused, preparing another attack, but then it suddenly froze. The soldiers watched in confusion as the massive creature remained still, wondering what was happening. The lieutenant voiced their thoughts, questioning if it was scared of something. The Kraken began to tremble violently, its armored plates shifting nervously. The soldiers were baffled by its fear, but the charging soldiers saw it as their chance and detonated his explosives in a massive blast. The soldiers watched anxiously, wondering if they had killed it. As the smoke cleared, the monster stood unscathed, its eye glaring. A soldier collapsed in despair, exclaiming it was impossible. The Kraken retaliated, swatting soldiers aside, sending one tumbling with a cry of pain. He looked up, dazed and confused. The lieutenant, however, suddenly understood. The reason the monster was terrified, he realized, was because of the figure who had just landed silently atop its massive head, Sora. Lieutenant Kajura watched in stunned silence as Sora dispatched the Kraken with a single, effortless blow, a creature that had just shrugged off an explosion. He recognized that such S-rank destructive power was rare, and he had never encountered this individual before. Determined to identify the newcomer, Kajura activated his Inspect advanced skill, which allowed users to view detailed information about a target, the precision increasing with proximity and decreasing with level difference. His eyes widened in disbelief. A system alert flashed, warning him to show your respect, and he realized with a jolt that he couldn't see any of Sora's information. The mental backlash was immediate and severe. His soldiers rushed to his side as he collapsed, shouting for a medic. Sora, seemingly unfazed by the commotion, turned to one of the remaining soldiers with a question mark look, asking if he could get some information. He inquired about the distance to evacuation shelter 6. The soldier replied that it was 50 kilometers north, but to reach it, one had to pass through Area X. Sora questioned what Area X was. The soldier explained it was where they were holding back the monster rush, concentrating the creatures there to minimize damage from fighting, and that many hunters were stationed there battling the monsters. Meanwhile, Sora noticed the glowing drops left by the defeated Kraken, internally remarking on how these rare drops meant the real world truly had become like a game. He then asked the soldier how strong the monster he just defeated was to them. The soldier, still shaken, admitted that a level 45 creature was quite a tough opponent. Sora mused that if this was already enough to cause them difficulties, he wondered how many monsters above level 45 were in the monster rush. The soldier estimated probably no more than 100, reasoning that if such powerful monsters were everywhere, humanity would have gone extinct long ago, perhaps even before they ran out of toilet paper. Sora acknowledged the information and prepared to leave. The soldier, visibly sweating, hesitated as Sora began to walk away. He then turned back, admitting his request might be unreasonable, but he implored Sora to go to Area X. He passionately argued that with a strong hunter like Sora, many people could be saved. Sora confirmed if the shortest route to Shelter 6 was indeed through Area X, to which the soldier affirmed. Sora agreed, much to the soldier's surprise. He stated that while he went through Area X, he would defeat any monsters unfortunate enough to cross his path. Later, at a frontline rear military camp, Lieutenant Kajura regained consciousness on a cot. A soldier informed him he had been out for about 10 minutes, and that the recovery items dropped by the monsters had worked right away, showing him a glowing vial. Kajura immediately asked about the man who had saved them earlier. The soldier reported that he had gone north. Kajura processed this, a grim look on his face, then suddenly sat bolt upright, demanding to know what the soldier had just said. The soldier confirmed that the man was returning to Evacuation Shelter 6. Kajura pressed if he was going through Area X. The soldier, looking uneasy, confirmed that Sora seemed not to care at all and went without hesitation. Kajura, now fully alarmed, ordered the soldier to contact the Central Command Center immediately, much to the soldier's confusion. Kajura glanced at his watch. There were about 10 minutes until the scheduled time, believing he should be able to make it. The soldier returned, stating he had sent a message with the emergency radio, but still questioned why they needed to contact Central Command. Kajura explained that this operation was different and highly classified, which was why the lower ranks hadn't been informed. He revealed that Area X, serving as the base for this operation, was not part of the region where they were merely holding back monsters. It was, in fact, a designated bombing zone, a connection to command now establishing. At the bustling Central Command Center, an operator reported an emergency call from Area B2Z. Central Commander Renji Kumagaya, a level 58 flame mage, ordered her to put them through. The operator complied, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Lieutenant Kajura's voice came through the comms, identifying himself with communication code BW3422 and stating he had a report. He informed them that a mysterious hunter had just left for the bombing zone, unaware of the impending operation. Commander Kumagaya, unimpressed, asked if Kajura was just there to report his mistake. Kajura denied this, insisting that an emergency broadcast was in order to inform the hunter of the incoming bombing. He vehemently stressed that the hunter was incredibly strong, and they couldn't let him die like this. At Central Command, Commander Kumagaya questioned Lieutenant Kajura's assertion about the hunter being strong, his voice echoing in the command room. He bluntly asked for the hunter's level. Kajura, through the holographic display, hesitated and then admitted with a frustrated sigh that he didn't know. Kumagaya let out a short, derisive laugh. He questioned why he should authorize an emergency broadcast for a hunter of unknown level who disregarded rules and entered a bombing zone. A female officer beside him, possibly an aide, coolly remarked that the hunter would probably be dead before any message could even go out, causing Kumagaya to chuckle quietly. Kumagaya then quipped that Kajura might not have a brain, but certainly possessed a talent for comedy, if he thought they'd risk a mission for some rando. He added that it seemed Kajura's subordinates hadn't been taught to stand on their own, while stating it wasn't really his place to interfere with Kajura's subordinates. Kumagaya then subtly threatened that if he reported Kajura for obstructing the operation's progress, Kajura would be held accountable. Another high-ranking officer, Western Commander Mie Tanasaki, a level 73 golem tamer, observed the exchange with a critical expression, wondering if Kumagaya was really going to drag his own people down when they were facing such a powerful enemy. Kumagaya, oblivious or uncaring, merely thought Kajura was an idiot for his sentimentality. Tanasaki mused that Kajura, despite being trained so carefully, was trying to save a complete stranger, even if it meant abandoning the operation. On the display, Kajura, still recovering from the information overload, could only wonder about the true extent of the hunter's power. Back in the field tent, Kajura stood firm. Tanasaki silently contemplated the situation, arms crossed. She then addressed Kajura directly, stating she trusted he had no intention of interfering with their plans, but warned that if he couldn't provide a convincing reason, she would personally put him on a military tribunal. Kajura looked momentarily stunned. Tanasaki then addressed Kumagaya, asking if her approach would be satisfactory for him. Kumagaya merely clicked his tongue in annoyance, then sternly told Kajura to give them an acceptable reason. Kajura, his resolve hardening, reported that the person in question had slain a level 45 baby kraken in a single hit. This revelation caused Tanasaki to react with visible shock. She exclaimed that this meant he was more powerful than an A-rank hunter, questioning if he could be an S-rank hunter from the military. Kumagaya dismissed this, stating all S-rank personnel were out on missions, and there were no confirmed signals for B2Z. Tanasaki then asked Kajura why he couldn't ascertain the hunter's level with his inspect skill. Kajura, looking embarrassed, admitted he was unable to see the hunter's level. He confessed that after using his skill, he had lost consciousness due to an information overload. Kumagaya's eyes widened slightly. This meant the hunter was at least level 100. He fell silent for a moment, considering this new information. He acknowledged that such strength was indeed rare, but declared it wasn't a reason to stop the operation. Eastern Commander Nobuo Yuasa, a level 44 rock mage, interjected, agreeing with Kumagaya and stating they couldn't abandon their military responsibilities for such uncertain reasons. He elaborated that thousands of troops from 4 different corps were involved in this operation, with enough troops to completely surround the bombing and buffer zones. The original plan, he explained, was for soldiers stationed in the garrison zone to take out scattered monsters after the bombing. However, if an emergency broadcast was made, the monsters would react to the sound, rushing to one place all at once. If that happened, the area would fall in an instant, and tens of thousands of soldiers would lose their lives. He concluded that saving one life, even in S-rank hunters, in exchange for tens of thousands of soldiers was a risk they would never take, offering a curt apology. Kajura was left speechless, sweating profusely as the weight of their decision settled. Tanasaki, her image flickering on the comm screen, also remained silent for a moment. She then stated her decision. She was rejecting Kajura's request, declaring they couldn't waste the efforts of so many for the sake of one man. The decision was final, she announced, as Kajura and his soldier looked on in despair. The connection terminated, leaving Kajura holding the deadcom device. He slowly lowered his hand, his grip tightening on the device. His soldier tried to console him, saying he had done what he could. Kajura remained still, his fist clenched. He then said that was right. What mattered was the big picture. Suddenly, Private Shoki Matsura's eyes glinted with resolve. He snatched the keys to a nearby jeep. Kajura, startled, asked what he was doing. Matsura yelled back that there were still 6 minutes until the bombing was about to start and sprinted towards the jeep, shouting for Kajura to come back. He jumped into the driver's seat, insisting there was still time. Kajura furiously demanded if Private First Class Shoki Matsura wanted to be court-martialed, ordering him to come back immediately as Matsura sped off. The other soldiers could only watch as the jeep disappeared. One asked if they should bring him back. Kajura, after a moment, replied that it was fine. Matsura had made his decision, and he was sure the private knew what he was getting himself into. Matsura, meanwhile, raced through the ruined streets, determined to make it in time, a desperate grin on his face. What Matsura didn't know at the time was that the man he was trying to save, the mysterious hunter currently facing a grim, chain-wielding figure in the desolate city, would become the hope for all mankind. Private Matsura sped through the desolate city, cursing his luck as he realized he'd lost Sora's trail. He frantically scanned the ruins, wondering where on earth the hunter could have gone. The jeep's clock showed 16 hours, 56 minutes, and 12 seconds. He was taking the fastest path, but time was rapidly running out. He reasoned that if he still couldn't find Sora, it meant the hunter was moving even faster than his vehicle. Up ahead lay Area X. Matsura decided that if he blasted the loudspeaker, Sora should be able to hear him. He hesitated, knowing this action would also tip off the monsters. The clock ticked relentlessly to 16 hours, 57 minutes, and 51 seconds. With a surge of determination, Matsura grabbed the microphone, declaring it didn't matter. He took a deep breath, steeling himself as the jeep bounced over the rubble-strewn streets. He felt like a disgrace to the army for this reckless act, but his resolve didn't waver. He yelled into the microphone, identifying himself as the soldier Sora had helped earlier. He urgently warned that the area was about to be bombed and that Sora needed to evacuate immediately. Sora, standing amidst the ruins, heard the broadcast repeating the evacuation order. He mused that this explained the absence of other hunters. The monsters themselves weren't much of a threat to him, but he doubted he could survive the heat of a bombing run from the jets now appearing overhead. He decided it was best to avoid pointless risks. Then, realizing the soldier had risked his life to warn him, Sora knew he couldn't let Matsura die there and took off. Matsura, still broadcasting, wondered if he had reached Sora. Just then, the clock hit 25 seconds, and a dragon-like monster swooped down, explosions erupting nearby. The tremors intensified. Matsura, horrified, realized his broadcast had indeed attracted the monsters. With the clock at 38 seconds, he knew he had to get away and slammed his foot on the accelerator. But his thoughts were still on Sora, knowing the hunter was still out there. Suddenly, the ground beneath his jeep gave way. Sora appeared at his window, knocking, and Matsura expressed his relief that Sora was alive. Sora, however, immediately questioned what the soldier meant about the area being bombed. Matsura glanced at the clock. 16 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. "Oh no," he exclaimed. The clock ticked over to 17 hours. "We're out of time." Missiles rained down from the sky, and massive explosions tore through the bombing zone. Sora and Matsura were caught in the cataclysm, the jeep flung through the air. The earth bucked and shattered, engulfing the vehicle in debris. Back at Central Command, an operator confirmed the bombing was 100% complete. Major General, the operator at the console, reported the bombing's completion. Commander Kamagaya ordered the use of drones to assess monster casualties and survivor locations. The operator soon reported that the drones weren't detecting any signs of life, then confusingly asked where the monsters that escaped had gone. Another operator, sweating, clarified that the monsters were still inside the bombing zone. With wide, terrified eyes, he stammered that the ones at the center of the bombing were completely unscathed. Kamagaya slammed his fist down, shouting that it couldn't be. Commander Tanasaki urgently asked about the drone feed. An operator frantically typed as all eyes in the command center focused on the main screen. The feed showed massive monsters, seemingly protected by a shimmering shield. Then, a cloaked figure with glowing eyes came into view. "Wait, hold on. Is that a person?" one of them exclaimed. The figure stood defiantly amidst the destruction. Suddenly, the operator cried out that the drone had been attacked by a monster. A monstrous roar echoed through the feed before it cut to static. On the ground, a huge dragon-like creature crushed the drone in its maw. The operator reported they had lost all communication with it. Tanasaki remarked that they had been told this wave of attacks would be different, wondering what that was back there. A horrifying realization dawned on her. They know we're scouting them with drones. Commander Yuasa looked grim. He ordered the evacuation of every soldier from the garrison area. Tanasaki countermanded, ordering a full retreat, but to hold the walls. The operator, however, reported that the monsters weren't heading for the walls, causing the commanders to look at each other in alarm. Then where are they going? Tanasaki demanded. The operator pointed to the map. To area B2Z. Tanasaki gasped. That was where the mysterious hunter had gone. Her eyes blazing, she ordered all remaining drones to B2Z, determined to find out what had stopped the monster's advance. Meanwhile, amidst the settling dust and crumbling buildings of Area B2Z, Matsura, dazed, realized the bombing had stopped. He was alive. He started laughing with relief. Sora, appearing beside him, drily remarked it was too early to celebrate. If Matsura was alive, then so were the monsters, and they were headed their way. Sora's eyes narrowed. He suddenly tackled Matsura, yelling, "Get down!" as something whizzed past. A military drone lay smashed nearby. Sora asked if monsters had attacked the drone, to which Matsura, shocked, replied this had never happened before. Sora told him to save his astonishment for later. They were about to have company, as a horde of monsters began to converge on their position. Matsura stared in open-mouthed horror as a horde of high-level monsters, led by a colossal level 90 cloaked figure, emerged from the dust, roaring their challenge. He recognized them as the highest level group in this monster rush, their leader an intimidating level 90. The fact that they hadn't suffered a single scratch from the massive bombing run sent a chill down his spine. He muttered that it was over for them. He lamented that they were going to die there. If even a bombing couldn't harm these creatures, they stood no chance. Sora, however, met the dire situation with a predatory grin, his eyes glowing. If bombing couldn't kill them, he declared, then they would just have to beat them to death. He instructed Matsura to hide in the jeep and launched himself into the fray. Sora moved like a phantom, a blur of motion as he tore through the lesser monsters, his attacks swift and brutal. The level 90 leader, the hooded figure, reacted quickly, a dark aura flaring around it as it slammed a massive shadowy appendage where Sora had been, the impact shaking the ground. Sora easily caught it, his own eyes glowing with power as he reappeared above the creature. The hooded figure, surprised, let out an enraged snarl and lunged again, but Sora was already a streak of motion, evading its attack and leaping high into the air above it. The monster's glowing red, I tracked him. Sora gathered his power, then descended like a meteor, delivering a devastating punch to the top of the hooded figure's head. The attack sent shockwaves through the massive creature, and fragments of its being flew off. Sora landed gracefully, turning to face the towering figure, which seemed to reform slightly. Sora was surprised. He hadn't been able to sense its presence at all. The hooded figure, its voice raspy, declared, "I finally," as shadowy tendrils began to coalesce around it, forming a familiar, ominous shape. "Found you," it finished, revealing the entity that had been hunting Sora, the one who had dispatched Yu's pursuers. "Seed of the Abyss," the hooded figure proclaimed, its true, monstrous form now visible behind the dissolving cloak, a grotesque, grinning visage. It then demanded that Sora, the thief, give back what was his. Sora, unfazed, asked what it was talking about. The hooded figure, its hands crackling with dark energy, declared that for the crime of taking another's power, Sora must pay with his life. It unleashed a barrage of shadowy spikes that shot toward Sora. Sora effortlessly caught several of the spikes. He looked at the hooded figure with disdain, remarking that if that was all it had, then it wouldn't be able to kill him. He manifested a dark spear and stood ready. The hooded figure let out a frustrated snarl. Suddenly, a military drone zipped past overhead. The hooded figure glanced up, initially mistaking it for one of Odin's ravens before dismissing it as a mere human imitation. Sora seized the distraction, yelling, "Hey!" and challenging it, saying that if it really wanted to kill him, it should come at him more seriously. He then lunged, plunging his spear deep into the hooded figure's shadowy form. The spear pulsed with dark energy. Sora then vanished, reappearing some distance away as the hooded figure's form began to unravel from the spear's impact. The creature hissed its disgust at being thwarted by vile humans and their low-level creations, which made it sick. It then commanded its remaining flying monsters to take out the observers. Inside a nearby, dilapidated building, a cloaked operative watched his drone feed. He cursed as a monster destroyed his drone, but a grim satisfaction settled on his face. He had somehow managed to complete his mission. Looking at the footage he'd captured, he realized the reason the monsters had changed course was because of Sora. This was the hunter who had faced the rush alone. He knew he needed to inform the commander about him immediately. He turned to leave, but froze as the floorboards above him creaked. Tentacles smashed down from the ceiling. He'd been found. Sora, witnessing the lesser monsters swarming in a nearby building, heard the hooded figure give a chilling command to its servants. Kill all of them. Sora's expression hardened. He recalled Matsura's earlier plea. If there's a strong hunter like you, I'm sure many people could be saved. And the soldier's desperate warning about the bombing. He remembered Matsura struggling with the jammed jeep door after the explosions. A core principle echoed in his mind. To hunt an enemy, you had to start with their leader. And if you wanted to save as many people as possible, you had to kill your enemies as quickly as possible. The hooded figure, sensing Sora's renewed focus, attacked again. Sora dodged, noting that by fusing with that man, the large monster's attack power had increased. He braced himself as the ground erupted around him. The disembodied voice of the fused entity taunted him for his persistence, but then it expressed surprise. Sora looked up, a strange realization dawning. The shadowy figure he was fighting, it looked just like him, wreathed in the same dark energy. The entity then unleashed a powerful energy surge from a newly formed dark sword, exclaiming that this sword was bad news. I will kill you, Seed of the Abyss, it roared, bringing the sword down. Sora met the attack head-on, declaring, that is your destiny. He parried the blow with his bare arm, then caught the blade in his hand, with a surge of his own power. The hooded figure looked on in stunned disbelief. Sora then swung the dark sword in a massive arc, cleaving through the monstrous form. The creature looked down, shocked that the attack was nullified too. Sora, however, felt a familiar energy surge, wondering if it was just his imagination. The power emanating from his dark spear, he realized with a jolt, was almost exactly like the power of the abyss. The hooded figure's shadowy form coalesced once more, tendrils swirling around it. It sneered, questioning if stealing somebody else's weapon was all Sora was capable of, and reached out a shadowy hand towards the dark spear Sora wielded. The spear in Sora's hand dissolved into nothingness. He noted its disappearance, musing that this was the power of the abyss, and it seemed there were still many uses for it that he hadn't discovered. Realizing the fight might drag on, he decided that first things first, he needed to get the soldier to safety. He turned to Matsura, who was still in the jeep, and asked if he was okay with heights. Matsura, bewildered, confirmed he was. Before the soldier could process further, Sora casually lifted the entire jeep, declaring, we're flying, much to Matsura's presumed terror, who probably wished he'd packed a parachute instead of extra rations. The hooded figure shrieked, calling Sora a fool and warning him not to take the power of the abyss lightly. It began to gather a massive sphere of dark energy, proclaiming that the strong don't exist to protect the weak, but rather to become the strongest, as the ominous orb grew, pulsing with a dark crest eye at its center. With a final curse, it launched the sphere towards the airborne jeep, commanding Sora to die alongside the weak human. Sora observed the projectile, noting its incredible speed. He knew that even if he tried to run, it would catch up to them. In that case, he decided he would just have to crush it. He leaped from the jeep, rocketing towards the incoming sphere of destruction, his fist crackling with power. He struck the sphere with all his might, but his attack had no impact at all. He realized with dawning horror that this was the real body of the attack. Crap! He exclaimed as the sphere continued undeterred towards the jeep. He yelled at Matsura to get out of the car. Matsura, panicking, cried out for it not to come any closer, while the entity's voice echoed, telling the pitiful lamb, not to be afraid. Sora's eyes blazed as the manifested dark tendrils, snaring the jeep and yanking it away from the projectile's path, shouting that he would carry Matsura back home. He cursed, struggling to manage both the jeep and evade the relentless sphere. The hooded figure taunted him, asking if he was angry now and advising him not to get so worked up. Suddenly, dark spikes erupted from the entity, impaling Sora and pinning him to the jeep. The creature observed, noting Sora wasn't dead yet. Then, with a chilling declaration of necromancy, it animated Matsura's body, the soldier's face twisting into a grotesque, smiling puppet. The entity reveled in Sora's predicament, cackling about the beautiful fate of a seed of the abyss, to watch everyone they care about die before their eyes. Sora remained silent, pinned and watching the horrific transformation. He then softly asked if the entity got off on trampling other people's dignity too, a flashback of Kagawa's bullying flashing in his mind. The hooded figure merely chuckled and, declaring there was no need to state the obvious, unleashed an obsidian storm, a torrent of razor-sharp shards that shredded Sora's body. Despite the agony, Sora looked up and defiantly asked, "Is that so?" He then focused his energy, deflecting the remaining shards away from the jeep and the puppet Matsura. "Scum like you." Sora seethed, his rage palpable. "Make me sick." He unleashed a fist, overwhelming the obsidian storm and tearing into the hooded figure, his gaze fixed and intense. Sora landed back on the jeep, only to be confronted by the necromantically controlled Matsura, whose eyes now glowed with a sinister red light as he smiled malevolently. The puppet lunged, grappling Sora fiercely. Caught off guard, Sora could only utter an apology before being thrown him into the jeep. He quickly regained his composure, his eyes locking onto the distant hooded figure, and launched himself towards it with blinding speed. He brought his hand down hard on the entity, declaring its efforts useless. The hooded figure sneered, calling Sora a rookie who couldn't even handle the power of the abyss and certainly couldn't hope to defeat him. Sora responded with a furious barrage of blows, sending the entity crashing to the ground. He followed up with a brutal punch that visibly stunned his opponent. "Impossible!" The hooded figure gasped, clutching its face. "You actually hurt me!" Sora retorted that people grow, calling the entity an idiot. The hooded figure, realizing the tide was turning, knew this was bad as Sora continued his relentless assault. It then expressed disbelief, asking if Sora had learned to control the power of the abyss just by seeing its moves. It looked around wildly, demanding to know where Sora had gone. Sora appeared above it, striking down with immense force. The hooded figure admitted Sora was tougher than it thought. Sora acknowledged that his foe might escape him, but he declared, "But let's see you escape this," as it unleashed a devastating slash. Sora, recognizing the familiar technique, knew then to aim for what he identified as the real body's core. He reached out, his hand grasping at the swirling darkness, and with a roar, commanded it to be crushed. The entity, caught within Sora's tendrils, could only utter a disbelieving "no way," as a brilliant light erupted from its core. The monstrous form began to disintegrate into particles of light and shadow. Sora stood firm as the colossal figure dissolved around him, his eyes glowing with power as he told the fading entity that it was next. Before completely vanishing, the hooded figure snarled, vowing it would remember this, and then desperately invoked Shadow Unity. The shadows of countless monsters it had absorbed swirled around its dissipating form, converging into a single point before vanishing into the ground, a desperate escape tactic. Sora was caught in the fading remnants of the technique, his eyes still aglow. He surveyed the now quiet, devastated landscape, muttering that the entity used such a grand technique just to escape, like a villain in a bad play doing a smoke bomb exit. Sora then looked down, noting with mild annoyance that his clothes were ruined. He retrieved a photo from his tattered jacket, relieved that his parents' picture was intact. He turned to Matsura, lying lifeless in the jeep, thinking that this soldier probably had a family waiting for him too. Sora gently took Matsura's dog tags, looking at the soldier's vacant face one last time before vowing to take him back. He knew this wasn't the end. The shadow-using entity had absorbed too much power and could attack again at any time. The entity's taunt about watching everyone he cared about die, a beautiful fate for a seed of the abyss, echoed in his mind, fueling his resolve. He couldn't let it get to Evacuation Shelter 6 first. He had to get there as soon as possible, preparing to move with incredible speed. Meanwhile, a military drone appeared over the ruined city. Commander Tanasaki, having arrived at the scene, ordered the drone squad to investigate carefully, ensuring they didn't miss a single mouse, while all other units remained on high alert. Her soldiers fanned out through the rubble. One reported that the monsters were all ready. Tanasaki acknowledged, knowing. She realized with a dawning horror that they've all been defeated as the camera panned over the fallen bodies of the high-level monsters. She quickly ordered her subordinate to check the drone data and report all information. There were clear signs of a battle. She pondered if the strong hunter Kajura mentioned had not only survived the bombing, but also wiped out the entire monster rush. Just then, a soldier called out, "Director," reporting that the SD card on the drone was still in good condition, and he would visualize the data now. Tanasaki prepared to look at the footage, which showed Private Matsura charging into the bombing zone, with the person next to him undoubtedly being the strong hunter. Elsewhere in the ruins, a soldier stumbled upon a hidden cache, exclaiming, "This is," as a purple glow emanated from the discovery. Before him lay a special energy potion, an A-rank ancient royal dagger, and an unidentifiable ornate box. His superior officer, noticing his distraction, called out, asking what he found. The soldier stammered, "In nothing," but the officer didn't believe him, confronting the subordinate. The officer, a man with longer blonde hair under his helmet, smirked, guessing the items were dropped by the rush boss, noting they looked rare. He reminded the younger soldier that taking items obtained by the unit for oneself was a crime, implicitly asking if he knew what he had to do. The subordinate soldier was silent, clutching the items, then nervously asked how they were supposed to divide it. The officer told him to relax, stating the only thing he wanted was the box. The younger soldier protested, exclaiming there was no way, as a box like that was bound to have a legendary item. The officer grabbed him, growling not to get the wrong idea, that he didn't have a choice. With a sinister chuckle, the officer took the box, his eyes glowing red as he declared he'd finally obtained a golem relic. Sora finally arrived at Evacuation Shelter 6, his gaze sweeping over the fortified area. It seemed, from the sight of soldiers and an anti-aircraft gun, that they hadn't been attacked yet, with civilians moving about below. A large, rugged man eyed a purple-haired individual suspiciously. As Sora, shirtless and scarred, walked through the crowd, people turned to stare with expressions of alarm. He focused, trying to sense the hooded figure, but its presence was gone. In fact, he didn't feel the presence of anyone particularly strong nearby. He mused that without a strong protector, this place would eventually be destroyed. Suddenly, a man in a wide-brimmed, conical hat appeared before him. Sora, slightly annoyed, wondered if the man was blind or just had a weird sense of personal space. The man, whose eyes were covered by a blindfold, commented on the dense scent of blood around Sora, deducing he'd come from outside. Sora confirmed this was correct. The man chuckled, relieved, and assured Sora he meant no ill will, offering a wad of cash and expressing a wish to buy information about the outside world. He added it would mean a lot if Sora possessed the information he desired. Sora, looking at the money, wondered if this was the local currency and agreed to share what he knew. The man was pleased, but Sora stated that before that, he'd like to ask him something. Sora, however, pointed out the oddity of a monk calling him "Your Excellency," bluntly stating the man must be a fake. The man laughed, admitting Sora had seen right through him and that the outfit was just a hobby. Sora then questioned if hiding his eyes was also a hobby. The man laughed nervously, calling Sora a troublesome guy, and claimed he'd recently contracted an eye disease. Sora wasn't buying it. Even with his eyes covered, he could sense a terrifying light emanating from the man. He concluded the man had reasons for concealing his power, a wolf in sheep's clothing hiding in this shelter. Changing the subject, Sora asked what the man wanted to know, prompting the man to finally ask his question. The man said he'd like to know what was happening outside, noting the armed soldiers gathered at the walls, clearly gearing up for battle. He added that while the general public might not have noticed, he had heard explosions outside and asked Sora to tell him what was going on. Sora, feigning ignorance with a cheerful stretch, said he wasn't sure either, claiming he was on an errand when he heard a blast from the southwest and got so freaked out he dropped his letter and had to use his shirt as a makeshift map. The man, momentarily stunned, realized Sora was also hiding his power. He thanked Sora for the information about the southwest, stating it was a huge help, to which Sora nonchalantly replied, "Don't mention it." As the man walked away, Sora wondered why he was heading in such vague directions by himself. He also pondered how many fighters of that man's caliber were out there, knowing he couldn't exactly make a scene himself, especially since they were letting someone as suspicious-looking as him wander freely. Perhaps humanity's guard was down because they were all facing the same enemy. Later, after a store employee bid him farewell, Sora emerged, having bought some new clothes with the cash the monk had given him. Now then, he thought, under the city's night sky, it was time to find his parents. He decided to start the old-fashioned way, looking at the photo of his family. He approached a woman and asked if she recognized the couple in the photo. The woman reacted with stark terror, stammering that she didn't know them before quickly scurrying away. Sora was perplexed, noting she reacted as if he'd shown her a ghost. As another man aggressively asked what the hell he was looking at, Sora, thinking everyone there was on edge, decided he'd have to ask him. The man shouted, "Hey you!" Sora, his eyes glowing faintly, simply asked, "What?" The man with a bandaged nose stated Sora didn't look like he was from around there and berated him for hitting on people with a picture in the middle of the night, questioning what era he thought this was. Sora, ignoring the tirade, simply asked if he knew the two people in the photo, thinking this guy was hitting on everyone he saw. The man looked, then recoiled, demanding to know why Sora had a photo of them and if he knew who they were. He then angrily asked what Sora's deal was with them. Sora calmly replied, "I'm their son." The man was utterly shocked, looking from the photo of a younger Sora to the imposing figure before him, exclaiming, "Why, you're that kid?" Disbelieving, he accused Sora of making fun of him and lunged forward to attack. A vehicle sped past in the background, the impact shattering the vehicle. The man was stunned into silence. Sora casually asked him to repeat what he'd said, as he hadn't heard him. The man, now terrified and sweating profusely, suddenly recognized Sora with an exaggerated, "Oh, so it was you. Wow, long time no see." He then stammered directions, telling Sora to go straight down the road to find their home. Sora simply said, "Thanks," and walked away, while the man called out, "Take care," visibly shaken, before muttering to himself that this was bad and he needed to gather everyone, running off in a panic. Sora walked on, finding it odd that a thug knew where his folks lived. Come to think of it, his dad was kind of anyone he met, a memory of his father interacting with people flashing through his mind. His mom was the same. Nice people like them just got taken advantage of in this world. He mused, recalling his mother waving goodbye. But it was okay, he thought with a determined smile. He was here now. He arrived at a traditional-looking house, thinking this must be the place, and wondering if those two lived here. With so many gone, there must be plenty of empty houses, he considered, before knocking on the wooden door. A voice from inside asked if he was done with work for today. Sora froze. That was his dad's voice. The door slid open, and his father stood there, exclaiming, "Welcome home." Sora, caught completely off guard, could only manage a stunned silence, a bead of sweat trickling down his face. His father, equally surprised by the stranger at his door, asked, "Huh? Who are you?" His expression shifting to alarm. Sora, flustered, replied, "It's me," as his father looked even more confused. "It's me, Sora," he finally managed to say, a nervous smile on his face. His father stared, his face a mask of utter disbelief and shock. The air in the traditional room was thick with unspoken words as Sora and his father sat opposite each other at a low table, a chasm of 5 years, and untold horrors stretching between them. The silence was eventually broken when Sora's mother entered, carrying a tray with tea, apologizing for the delay in serving them. She gently inquired if the two of them had still not exchanged a single word. Sora's father admitted that he could hardly believe it. The young man before him was a completely different person from the Sora they used to know. Suddenly, his father declared with an odd intensity that at a time like this, they needed those, much to his wife's surprise. Sora, a faint smile playing on his lips, asked what exactly those were. His father explained it was to be an exchange of secrets between a father and his son, a sacred ritual, or so he claimed. Internally, he resolved that while he didn't want to expose his own secrets to his wife, if this person claiming to be Sora couldn't provide satisfactory answers, he wouldn't be leaving unscathed. He mentally signaled a hidden guard, instructing them to deal with this newcomer if anything even slightly suspicious was uttered. From the shadows and the rafters, a hooded figure acknowledged the command with a silent Roger. Sora, however, had already noticed the henchman, a clear sign that his father was still deeply wary. With such tight security, Sora felt he could actually relax a bit, and he asked his father if he was up for this exchange of secrets. A smirk touched Sora's lips as he mentally addressed the hidden guard, advising him to take care, because he was about to hear things he probably shouldn't, things that might make him question his boss's entire persona. Sora began, casually revealing that every weekend his father used to attend cooking classes at the homemaker support group, much to his mother's quiet amusement as she sipped her tea. His father was visibly shocked, his mind reeling as he wondered how Sora could possibly know that. Even the henchman, Okii, was flabbergasted, his surprise echoing the father's, who was now comically imagined with a chef's knife and a tomato, his secret culinary passion exposed. Sora wasn't finished, adding that on top of the cooking classes, his father would also sneak off every week to take ballet lessons. The image of his burly father in a tutu, performing ballet, sent Okii into further shock. Sora's father was stunned into silence, and Okii's eyes widened in disbelief. Slamming his hand on the table, though his wife remained placidly sipping her tea, Sora's father blustered that while Sora's words might be true, one didn't have to be his son to figure those things out. His father, a warm smile now gracing his features. Then Sora offered to tell him something about their family. With a gulp, his father urged him to go ahead. Sora gestured towards a Japanese sword displayed prominently in the room, stating that it was just a replica. Okii, still eavesdropping, was taken aback by the claim. Sora's father, outraged, demanded to know if Sora had any proof, shouting not to be ridiculous. Sora simply asked if he wanted proof, then calmly walked over to the sword, picked it up, and declared that the hilt had his brother Riku's bite marks on it. The henchman, Okii, was horrified, recalling the legendary tale of the family head, his hands bound, biting down on that very blade to free himself, and subsequently slaying 38 enemies. Sora drew the blade smoothly from its sheath. Okii, ever the cynic, scoffed internally, thinking Sora was all talk, and his real goal was to catch the family head off guard and finish him. Sora held the blade up for inspection, and with a subtle click, the blade extended slightly, then retracted. Sora remarked with a knowing look that it retracted too, confirming Okii's earlier silent gasp of, "It extended." "You idiot!" his father suddenly roared, not in anger, but in a voice choked with emotion. In the next instant, he had lunged forward, pulling Sora into a crushing hug, exclaiming that they thought he was dead. Tears streamed down his father's face as he sobbed that it was really him, their Sora, finally home. Sora, momentarily stiff with surprise, could only manage a soft, "Dad," as his father continued to weep, lamenting the hardships they had endured. His father explained, between sobs, that they had scoured every landmark, every possible place, for any intel on him, and before he knew it, His search had somehow led him to become the boss of this group. And now, he cried, that very boss was bawling his eyes out like a baby. How pathetic. He then, rather abruptly, asked Sora if he could bring the person lurking above them down. Oki, the henchman, felt a chill as he realized the family head. A man who had lived his entire life under a rain of blood was showing such vulnerability. He had never witnessed anything like it. Shoot, he thought in panic. I saw the family head, someone who cherishes honor above all, in such a state. He had to get out of there, silently begging not to be killed for what he'd seen. Just as he tried to make his escape, a hand shot out and grabbed him firmly. It was Sora, who calmly informed the terrified Oki that his dad wanted to talk. A few moments later, Oki found himself seated at the table, surrounded by Sora, his father, and his mother. The room once again quiet, but now charged with a different kind of tension. Sora's father glared at him, stating icily that Oki, out of all his guards, had the loosest tongue. Sora smirked, adding that if the secrets just revealed were to get out. His father finished the threat with a menacing grin. It's on you, making Oki flinch violently. Oki hastily promised he wouldn't say a single word. Internally, he was now utterly convinced. There was no doubt about it. These two, with their shared capacity for playful menace, were definitely father and son. Sora's mother gently chided them, telling them not to threaten Oki. The henchman looked at her with tear-filled, grateful eyes, murmuring, "Ma'am." She smiled kindly, then added with a sweet but firm tone, but absolutely not a word. Oki bowed his head low, in compliance. "Yes, ma'am." Sora's father muttered under his breath that he was just glad Sora hadn't mentioned his nocturnal habits of farting or snoring, to which his wife drily retorted that he had just brought it up himself. Sora let out a small, genuine smile, a warmth spreading through him. It felt like he had just crawled out of the abyss all over again, but this time into the light. Looking at his father and his mother, her eyes soft with joy, he felt a profound sense of peace. He was really home. However, just as the emotional reunion settled, Sora's keen senses picked up an approaching commotion. The peaceful moment was shattered as the thug he had encountered earlier burst into the room, shouting for his boss. Backed by a group of equally rough-looking men, the thug breathlessly announced that there was a white-haired kid looking for him. The thug, flanked by his crew, stood dramatically in the doorway, interrupting the family's reunion. Sora, with a slight smirk, wondered aloud if the white-haired kid the thug was referring to happened to be him. The thug, upon actually seeing Sora seated calmly at the table, stammered in surprise. Then his eyes widened in terror as he shrieked that it was indeed him. Pointing accusingly, the thug boasted that while Sora might be strong, they had numbers on their side. He then aggressively questioned if Sora was planning something against their boss, and if he was from the Tiger's Roar Guild, a notion Sora found mildly amusing. Him? Part of some organized group? He was more of a solo act, and definitely not a member of a Tiger's Roar fan club. Before the thug could continue his tirade, Sora's hand shot out. Sora's eyes then pulsed with a faint, intimidating purple light, causing the thug to flinch. Turning to his father, Sora suggested it might be a good time for an introduction to his men. His father announced to the stunned onlookers that this was his son, Sora, who had been missing for 5 years and had finally returned that day. He then attempted to use his systems inspect skill, muttering about Sora's level, only to recoil in shock, his eyes wide with disbelief as he exclaimed that he couldn't read Sora's level at all. Sora calmly stated that he didn't have the system, a declaration that sent ripples of astonishment through the assembled thugs. One of them asked incredulously if Sora had truly survived in the Fallen Zones for 5 years without the system's aid. The first thug, still recovering, reasoned that if Sora lacked the system, then, as Sora himself coolly interjected with a knowing look, no matter how hard one trained, they couldn't get past level 10. Another of the thugs scoffed, dismissing Sora as just a beginner despite the earlier claims of his strength. The first thug laughed nervously, admitting he must have been mistaken about Sora's power, though a sliver of doubt remained as he internally questioned how Sora could have been unharmed by their previous scuffle if he was truly a mere beginner. Sora remained silent for a moment. Then, with a challenging glint in his eye, he asked if they wanted to try seeing his level with their system. The first thug looked thoroughly confused. Sora patiently explained that since he didn't possess the system, he obviously wouldn't know the basic information about how it worked. The thug, eager to demonstrate his knowledge, clarified that with the system, one could see the levels of monsters, but to see the levels of other people, one needed the inspect skill, which was a rare ability. He proudly added that their boss, Sora's father, possessed this rare skill. Sora, with a slight, almost unreadable smile, invited his father to take a look, though his inner thoughts drifted to his wish for information about the abyss. His father gestured for the thugs to gather closer and observe. Sora then turned to his mother, asking if she wasn't going to check as well. She replied softly that, more than anything, she just wanted to be by his side, and besides, she already knew. As his father activated the inspect skill, a glowing blue interface appeared before him. But the results were just a series of question marks where Sora's system information should be. Frustrated, he confirmed that no matter how many times he tried, he got the same result. He couldn't see any information on Sora. He theorized that there could be two possible reasons for this. Either Sora truly had no system as he claimed, or, as the thugs looked on with dawning apprehension, Sora's level was simply too high for his inspect skill to perceive. He noted, however, that even without system data, he could still see Sora's name, Sora Mukujima. Moreover, Sora had survived alone in the Fallen Zones for 5 long years. He would have been dead long ago if he were a mere beginner. His father concluded, with a mixture of awe and trepidation, that Sora's level must be beyond his perception, prompting him to wonder aloud just what his son had been doing these past 5 years. Sora's mother, her expression serene, gently asked if, in any case, they shouldn't simply be happy. She looked at Sora with a warm smile, stating that Sora was a strong child and that he must have gone through a lot to come back to them, her hand reaching out to gently touch his cheek. Overwhelmed, Sora could only murmur, "Mom," as flashes of his brutal 5 years in the abyss. The endless fighting, the blood, the despair flickered through his mind. A single tear escaped his eye and traced a path down his scarred cheek. He pulled his mother into a hug, reassuring her that it was all right now, that he was back, and gently telling her not to cry, even as her own tears flowed freely. His father watched them, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. Composing himself, Sora's father addressed his men, telling them to get out and give the reunited mother and child some space after such a long time. Once the room was cleared and the door slid shut, his father's expression turned concerned as he asked about Jiro and the others, noting it had been 2 hours and they still hadn't returned. Seizing the opportunity, Sora quickly asked his mother about his brother, Riku, a flicker of worry crossing his face. His mother reassured him that Riku was fine, explaining that he was in the military and didn't come home often. She then showed Sora a picture of Riku on her phone, a handsome young man in military uniform, explaining that he had been fighting on the front lines all this time, almost as if he were trying to avenge Sora. Looking at the image, Sora felt a pang of longing. He hadn't seen his brother in so long. He then asked his mother if she held a high-ranking position within their group. She confirmed with a knowing smile that she indeed had status, explaining that the reason the men trusted her was because she was a cleric, a healer with many abilities, capable of providing great support and even prophecy. Intrigued, Sora asked if, as a cleric, she could see what was going on with him. She replied that she didn't have the ability to see specific skills, prompting Sora to ask how then she knew he would return. She gently touched his face again, reminding him that, as she'd said, clerics possessed the gift of prophecy. With a radiant smile, she told him she knew, with unwavering certainty, that he would return one day. Later that night, under the pale light of the moon, a soft knock echoed on their door. From inside, a wary voice, belonging to Rick Mukai of Tiger's Roar, asked who it was. The door slid open to reveal the heavily scarred and muscular man, now looking utterly terrified as he stammered. Vice Chief. Sora's father, Richt Mukai of the Tiger's Roar Guild, was greeted with a welcoming welcome back by Jiro Iwashima, the vice president of the United Guilds, a man with a distinctive X-shaped scar on his forehead and a crescent moon necklace, accompanied by his entourage. Richt, noticing Jiro's solemn expression, inquired why he had such a long face. Jiro asked if something had happened, explaining he had sent someone to investigate behind the scenes and wanted to know what they found out. Richt, with a grim look, confirmed Jiro's suspicions. Tiger's Roar was indeed related to the army. He recounted how they'd turned in monster carcasses to the army as usual, but a guy with a notebook started nitpicking during the inspection, claiming the carcasses were too damaged for acceptance, then made an excuse to only give them half the points while reporting the full amount to his own superiors. Upon further checking, all the disparities in points and resources seemed to lead directly to Tiger's Roar. Richt understood, so that was what happened. He mused that if Tiger's Roar, a guild supposed to be neutral, was pulling stunts like this, there had to be more to it. However, they couldn't just sit back and be trampled, as that would affect the town's future. Jiro, trying to ease the tension, told Richt that, for now, he should get some food and rest. Richt, however, declared he would head over to Tiger's Roar later and straighten things out, his hand resting on the hilt of his glowing blue sword. He proclaimed they had to show them that the United Guilds weren't naive. Sora, who had overheard the entire exchange, thought to himself, Tiger's Roar. He realized that thanks to the black shard he'd absorbed in the abyss, not only had his strength increased, but all his abilities and senses had gone into overdrive. He could even pick up distant sounds now. It seemed Kagawa and the robbers he'd dealt with earlier were also tied to Tiger's Roar. He wondered if his dad was really going to negotiate with them, a flicker of worry crossing his face. Just as his father and Jiro were about to leave, Sora moved to open the sliding door, announcing that he was coming with them. The thug Sora had previously encountered perked up, thinking this might be his chance to see Sora's true powers. Jiro and Richt looked back in surprise, and Jiro asked who Sora was. Richt explained that this was his son, Sora, who had been missing in the Fallen Zone for 5 years. Jiro, incredulous, asked about Sora's level after surviving alone for so long. Richt, after a moment, then revealed that Sora didn't possess the system. Jiro questioned if Sora was just a normal person, scoffing that without the system, he'd be dead meat in any shelter and wouldn't last 3 days out in the Fallen Zones. He acknowledged that survival wasn't entirely impossible with elite stats and top-tier survival skills, but conceded that without job skills, he'd become dead weight the moment things turned into a fight. Jiro then clapped Richt on the shoulder, loudly proclaiming that it was great news Sora was back, but he must be exhausted, suggesting he sit this one out and get some rest, looking to Richt for agreement. Richt, after a brief hesitation, agreed, telling Sora to stay home with his mother. Sora's mother chimed in, saying it was a good idea as she hadn't even shown him around the house yet. Sora felt a pang of frustration. Did they really think he'd be of no use in battle? He supposed it was to be expected. To anyone with the system, he was just a normal human. He also realized he hadn't fully grasped the shelter situation. If there really was a monster as he was imagining, he needed to hide his real powers so he wouldn't drag his parents into it. He finally relented, saying, "All right," much to Jiro and Rick's surprise. The thug looked crestfallen, realizing he'd lost his chance to see Sora's powers. Jiro then rallied his men, and they departed. Once they were gone, Sora's mother reassured him not to fret too much, explaining that his father was just worried about him. She added that, having just reunited after such a long time, of course his father wouldn't want to put him in any more danger. Sora started to protest, but his mother, ruffling his hair, playfully insisted it would be fine because he was really strong, adding that she always used her prophetic vision to see the future and had told her he'd come out of this safely too. Just like he always does, she should get a lottery ticket with that kind of luck. Sora grumbled that he wasn't a kid anymore, though he couldn't hide a small smile. He knew his mom used her prophecies to foresee danger, But Tiger's Roar being connected to the military meant his dad would only keep clashing with them more often from here on out. He asked his mother about the shelter's current situation and why Tiger's Roar was on bad terms with them. She explained that ever since Judgment Day, a hunter guild founded by the Awaken had joined forces with the military to manage the shelters. His father then started the United Guilds and cooperated with the military at Evacuation Shelter 6 in hopes of finding Sora. The United Guilds grew this large because everyone was moved by his father's vow to find each other's family. The United Guilds handled keeping order, scavenging supplies out in the field, and dealing with monsters, while the military took care of breaches and tower raids. Her husband, she explained, was a kind man, which was why he didn't want to send his own people into the dangerous breaches. That's how they managed to preserve the peace for the past 4 years. However, several months ago, Tiger's Roar, a large hunter guild from Evacuation Shelter 4, came and set up a branch in their territory. Ever since then, their conflict with them had never stopped. Sora questioned why the military wouldn't interfere. His mother explained that since their enemies kept getting stronger, the army couldn't hold them back anymore. Tiger's Roar was founded to clear the towers, and their strength was so overwhelming that the army had no choice but to lean on them. Information on tower raiding was valuable enough that the military couldn't just ignore it. On top of that, Tiger's Roar had an Awaken chosen by the tower deity, Asura. This chosen one was Tiger's Roar's real trump card. Sora asked what a tower deity was. His mother elaborated that they were the lords of the towers, their power practically equivalent to a god's for humans. If one passed the deity's trial, they became an Asura and were bestowed with divine power. They were considered God's messengers outside the towers and also became guardians within the tower's walls. Tiger's Roar currently had the most Asuras, and since each Asura harbored absurd power, Tiger's Roar had swallowed up every neighboring guild in no time. While his father's guild was beloved by the locals, they had never cleared a single tower. They were the only ones in the Union still struggling without an Asura. Sora grimly acknowledged that the situation was pretty bad. He then paused, asking if people loved the United Guilds. Why did they behave like a Yakuza group? His mother chuckled, admitting that was just her personal preference, causing Sora to sigh good-naturedly. She added, what did it matter? Everyone was happy and full of energy. She then urged him to go take a nice bath, saying he must be tired, even playfully offering to wash his back, to which Sora, flustered, quickly declined, saying he'd do it himself. His mother smiled, remarking how much he'd grown up. Alone in his room, Sora felt a faint purple aura emanate from him. All right, she's gone, he thought, using his enhanced senses to confirm his mother had left. Looking out the window, he realized he'd had no idea the situation was this serious. He still couldn't help but worry about his dad. With a determined look, his eyes glowing faintly, Sora leaped from the window, following his father. From her own window, his mother watched him go, a knowing smile on her face, murmuring that they told him to get some rest, but children could be such a handful sometimes. Sora's father, Sakuya, was resolutely heading towards the Tiger's Roar Guild with members of the Union Guild at his back. Meanwhile, Sora, perched atop a building, surveyed the cityscape. Everything but the shelter was pitch black, which he figured was a good thing, making it easier to find what he was looking for. He spotted his father's group below. Over there! Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over him, wondering aloud why he felt so faint. Sora, too, felt this strange sensation clutching his head. Ever since being strengthened by the fragments of the abyss, he hadn't even caught a common cold, so this was unusual. Then he recognized the oppressive feeling, seed of the abyss. An ethereal voice whispered, followed by a chilling, "This is," and a determined, "I won't let you run away." He recognized that guy's voice from the earlier battle. This was going to be more annoying than a mosquito in a soundproof room. The spectral image of the hooded figure, his previous adversary, appeared beside him, a smug grin on its face. Sora wondered if the entity was hiding its presence, as he couldn't sense him at all. Damn it! So he was in Shelter 6 after all. Sora cursed inwardly as another wave of dizziness hit him. The hooded figure's voice echoed again. I won't let you run away, seed of the abyss. Again, because your soul has been marked by me. Just then, a ghostly, laughing apparition of the entity lunged at Sora from behind, phasing through him as he exclaimed, There he is! Sora stumbled forward from the disorienting attack, questioning if it was an illusion as the entity's voice repeated its taunt. He wondered if this was the soul marking the entity spoke of, as the apparition's laughter intensified. From below, someone, noticing Sora on the rooftop, shouted, Hey, what are you doing here at this time of night? Sora, realizing he'd shouted aloud during the illusion and alerted them, quickly yelled back, Get down. An energy blast suddenly struck the rooftop where he'd been standing. The illusion disappeared, Sora mused, leaping to another rooftop, landing gracefully. But the ghostly apparition was back, clinging to him and repeating its vow not to let the seed of the abyss run away. It's back again, Sora thought, annoyed. He wondered if it had disappeared because of the light. Standing under the full moon, he decided to test his theory. Let me give it a try. He moved under a street lamp. I think I kind of get it, Sora murmured to himself. He deduced that if he stayed in the dark for 7 seconds, the soul marking activated, and he got very dizzy. Also, if he lost his composure, the dialogue of the taunting illusion changed, becoming the smug assertion that his soul had been marked. And, creepily enough, only he could see this Chinibio face as a nearby civilian girl looked at him like he was crazy for reacting to nothing. When he walked under the light, a screeching noise started ringing in his head, and after a while, the marking disappeared, and he stopped seeing the entity. He figured the reason he hadn't experienced this before was thanks to the sunlight and the lights in the house. That must be it, he concluded, though the seed of the abyss taunt still echoed faintly. But the entity might still be able to find his location, even if the illusion was gone. It could launch a surprise attack at any time, so he couldn't let his guard down. First, however, he needed to find his dad, even as the annoying illusion reappeared, still vowing not to let him escape. Sora finally snapped, yelling, Ugh, shut up, startling a passing woman. He quickly followed his father's group. As the car's headlights washed over him, the illusion vanished once more. Yep, he doesn't appear when there's light, Sora confirmed. A more serious thought struck him. If, as his mom said, the United Guilds were no longer of any use to the military, then his dad could be in real danger. He didn't know how many strong people were in the shelter, or if the monk he'd met earlier was friend or foe, but there was no way a military-allied guild like Tiger's Roar would just sit around quietly. There was a big chance they were trying to destroy the United Guilds. In that case, Sora's eyes hardened with resolve, a purple aura flaring around him. I'll protect Mom and Dad, even if it means killing everyone, he vowed silently, his feet firmly planted. A wave of melancholy washed over him as he wondered if they could really not go back to those peaceful days. He soon arrived at a large building where his father's group was gathered outside. Looks like I've reached the place, he observed, peeking from behind a pillar. He wondered how his dad would handle the discussions, recalling his father's words from his childhood. When in conflict with someone, violence should be your last resort. It's a last resort, okay? Followed by a younger Sora's innocent, Okay, got it. Would his father wait until the last moment even now? His senses sharpened. From the crowd, 2 men in sunglasses pushed forward, telling others to get out of the way because it was starting. One of them remarked it had been a while since the boss drew his sword. The last time, he'd sent nearly 20 men to the hospital without even using his full gear. Sakuya, Sora's father, his eyes glowing with red energy, called out, Sachita, come out and face me. He then unleashed a powerful slash of his sword, sending a wave of crackling blue energy towards the building, which exploded on impact. Sakuya charged forward, his eyes blazing, followed by Jiro and the others. Sora, watching from the sidelines, could only utter a shocked, huh.